Hi, I'm Silvana from Pactum AI.
Hi, I'm Martin, the CEO and co-founder of Pactum.
And I'm Dan Calderwood, the Chief Commercial Officer at Veritiv Corporation.
So we're here as Pactum to have a conversation with one of our Fortune 500 customers, Veritiv, to discuss our partnership and our future together.
I was just really impressed. We were going through this list in the back office talking about what a diverse group of companies. These are all the different companies that are in this room. So make sure you spend time and get to know all the different people in this room. This is a brain trust. And if you guys don't know it, we are the cool kids, okay? We are the procurement geeks. We get sourcing. We get third-party risk. You want to talk to these people. So I am so proud to have such diversity in this room alone. And with that, we are going to go on to our keynote number 2. So I would like to invite up to stage two gentlemen, Dan Calderwood, Senior Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer for Veritiv. He leads customer experience, data analytics, digital commerce, marketing, pricing, as well as category management operations. And with him is Martin Rand, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Pactum AI. This is a groundbreaking technology that's revolutionized the ways that businesses negotiate.
Hey everyone. So what Pactum does is we use AI to negotiate supplier deals for the largest enterprises in the world, including Walmart, Maersk, Veritiv, and we unlock hundreds of millions of dollars of value for these enterprises. Now, we are a natively AI company. That means we started from AI, we started from negotiations, and procurement. We saw that we could provide a solution to procurement, so we went into procurement. When we started in 2019, nobody was talking about AI. So when we organized events, we had a line of people wanting to know about what is AI in procurement. Is it still the case? Now, every presentation in here is about AI. It's AI, 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 AI. When does it stop? So we were the first company to start talking about AI and procurement. We're going to be the first company to stop talking about AI procurement. And that's why we thought we'll organize this session here in a very straightforward way. Here's a customer who uses a technology to generate value. And we're not going to talk about AI. We're just going to talk about how does it work and what value can companies get from that. The way we'll do this is that I will ask some questions from Dan. Then Dan will grill me with some questions. So it's not me coming on stage and presenting what we do. No, I have to show that we provide value here. And then we're going to leave some time for questions as well. Okay, but then Dan,
yeah.
So what does Veritiv do, and how do you view innovation in Veritiv?
Absolutely. So thanks for having us up here. I like the format with Martin. Gives me a chance to grill him at some point in front of all of you as witnesses, so that'll be fun. But what is Veritiv is the first question, and it was interesting as the list of companies that were flashed up came up there. Veritiv is a supplier to many of your organizations. We are a $6 billion packaging supplier. We're in the packaging distribution space. We're out of Atlanta, Georgia. Our primary business is really going to be focused on taking the goods and services that you make and make sure that they're packaged right and they reach their destination in one piece. So that's primarily what we do. And my role, as it said in the beginning of the presentation, is I'm the Chief Commercial Officer. And in our world, what that means is I have a lot of the data analytics. I have a lot of the process of running kind of the procurement waves, as we call them, as well as working with Martin and the team on working through our supply base as well. So to the question of what Veritiv does to be innovative, there's really a couple places that we're always looking for innovation. Obviously, in the packaging space, everything sustainable packaging is at the forefront of our mind. We're probably the leader in sustainable packaging out there. So that's a big one for us. We're looking at what's new in that space, specifically in areas around cold chain, specifically around automation. That would be the place that we most naturally preside. But the other area within innovation that we have to be good at as a distributor is process innovation. It's just making sure that we're as automated as we can be through the process, whether that's the physical shipping of product or just the processes that we do from procurement to collections, all those type of things. And so those are the biggest areas that we probably focus innovation on.
And talking about innovation, so you got a robot talking to your suppliers. That sounds like sci-fi. How did that happen?
It's an interesting story of why I'm on the stage right here. Is one of my customers is another distribution company called Wesco. And one day, all of a sudden in my inbox, I just got an email from Wesco. And I kind of looked at the email. It actually came to me from our CFO. It went originally to the CFO. He sent it to me, so then I have to pay attention to it. So I click on it, and what I find myself in is this interactive experience with Wesco. And so, it was like I was most likely multitasking in a meeting when I started. And so I started just kind of clicking through, and it kind of builds, and there's a narrative, and you're going back and forth and clicking like sliders and having this really like two-way conversation with a very clear just kind of like AI bot. And so what I found myself doing is being massively distracted about what Wesco is asking me about and becoming 100% interested in what is this, who is producing it, and how do I start doing it. And so this is how I came across Martin and Pactum, was really just being on the other side of it and seeing what was probably possible for Veritiv to do with our supply base.
And what can be negotiated that way? What areas or what terms are you negotiating?
Yeah, no, and it started, where we started with it is probably different than where we are right now. Where we started with it was we said, okay, let's look at some of the easier ones to begin with. And for us, what that meant was, all right, we're talking about going to our suppliers, so we're going to push on payment terms. We're going to push on rebates. And then we're also going to push on just general, what I would call data collection or data attribute collection from them. And that would be things like, are you a diverse supplier? Tell us about yourself. Like just those type of things that in some of our, with some of our supplier data, we didn't have those areas filled in. So it let us kind of at first go after those 3 points of collection. Now we've gotten better, we've gotten smarter, we've continued to evolve after that. But where we started out was we started off with what I would call those 3 basics.
Okay. And so what areas are you now looking into to negotiate?
Yeah, that's the next question. And so to kind of place where we are in the process with Pactum is we've kind of completed our beta test. And so we really kind of threw this out at first, and we focused on about 100 suppliers. And we naturally said, okay, where are you going to go if you're looking at 100 suppliers? Well, let's look in the supplier tail, the suppliers that we rarely talk to. So we originally kind of took the bots, we threw them in the tail. We took, because our data wasn't always the best for those wonderful suppliers of ours. So what we did at that point is we said, we've got to look at the big things like terms, like rebates, where we can kind of be more bludgeoning with a hammer. We don't have the precise data. Since then, we've continued to kind of evolve how we use it. We've learned a lot through the process. And so what we started to do is not just go after the big things like terms, but go after very specific things like, hey, based on this indice, we think that this item is priced too high. Like, let's start individual negotiation on items or market baskets with different suppliers. So it's changed for us where it was, again, it started out a little more broadly, which was great. And now what we've just been able to do is refine the approach, refine the data that's needed to kind of go towards a deeper P&L impact.
So we as a company have always been proud of hard savings. That we don't just provide efficiency gains, they're hard to quantify. We actually provide better deals that are very easily measurable. Mm-hmm. When we talk to large customers, and the larger they are, the more we see that process optimization is more and more needed in that, not just hard savings. So what is your opinion in that? Did you do this for hard savings or process optimization? Yes.
We did it for both. And so, and the nice thing is we got both. And to be honest with you, Martin, like when we started it, like I hadn't thought about any of the softer kind of process improvement stuff. It was like just show me the money type of an approach. But what was surprising us when we went through it is, again, just if you think about how we started it, we went after the tail suppliers. And so what we started to see through it was like, yes, we got the hard savings, and I love every bit of that. But then also what we started to get is a larger conversation with some of these smaller niche suppliers around where they could actually help us impact growth more. So we started to kind of bring some of them, not all of them, but some of them closer to the limelight on our preferred supplier list that allowed us to kind of have new partners in new geographies where we might not have, and those type of things. So what we began to realize quickly is that it became a tool for us to interact with our supply base at a different level, where it wasn't just about, a big part of it was the hard savings, but it was also about like, hey, where can you help us? What gaps do you have? Are there specific regions that you service? Like, you can put those questions in there, where we began to, I think, learn a little more about those suppliers that we don't interact with heavily.
So I think everyone has experienced talking to a customer support AI bot where they don't understand what you want, and it's a hassle. So you had bots negotiating and communicating with your suppliers. What did the suppliers think of this?
Yeah, it was surprising for us, because what we've had is, if you think about, I'll use kind of round numbers here, but within our test, we grabbed like 100 suppliers. If you think about like the hard stats of it, what we started to see is out of the 100 suppliers that we threw this at, we had about a full completion rate of like 30 to 40%, which is really surprising, because again, we threw bots at the tail to 100 people, and 30 to 40% of them are actually going all the way through the process. Of those 30 to 40%, the feedback we got was actually really favorable. It was about a 90% in the post-survey said that it was a favorable experience, which really surprised us. And a few of them, which I think this might have been a dig at us, but a few of them were saying that this was the easiest negotiation we've ever had with Veritiv, which is like, okay, like, thank you, suppliers. Also, it's probably true, but it was a little bit of a dig towards us. And within that, I think what we learned is, it's not just about, throwing the bots at the tail, like I'm saying in a joking way, but part of the learning we had is the bots, you can make it and design it so it doesn't feel like, you're just going through and you're asking it a question and it's just giving you the wrong answer. Because it's a really elegant system. For us, what started to change, where we started to get the completion rate up, is when we started to do little things like try to humanize it on the front end. So when we send out the process to our suppliers, now we attach a little video with our sourcing team kind of smiling at them and telling them, hey, don't worry, this is Veritiv. We just want to use this process to get to know you better and see where we can partner more. And so when you kind of added a face to it, we saw that it became more approachable for the people on the other end. But again, even as you just think about that, even before we had that little happy video kind of added to the front end, it was still a 90% favorability rating. So the people that completed it certainly enjoyed it, so which we were encouraged by.
So how much effort does it take? I hear from many people that, I would like to use these innovative things, but my data is not where it should be. I need to fix my processes. I need to fix my platforms. How much effort did it take?
The first one is always the hardest one, and we had a lot of learnings from that one. And that was the one where you're like always battling what was kind of like your desire for the data to be, and then what the actual requirement of the data was. And so when we went into it, we had this expectation that our data had to be much more perfect than it is. Because at Veritiv, we've got, like I mentioned before, we're $6 billion. We have about 500,000 items that we stock and we sell. We've got 40,000 customers. We've got about 10,000 suppliers. We do not have great data across many of those areas, like many of you, I would assume. And so for us, we went in a little bit apprehensive and like had this moment where like, well, we have to have our data perfect before we go and talk to our suppliers. And I think that was one of the first things we probably got wrong, was you don't have to have your data perfect. There's some things you definitely have to have in your data. But for us, one of the big learnings was it was better for us to go to the supplier and even in many cases allow them to fill out the data for us, and then kind of go about it that way. So I think that was the thing, a big learning kind of our initial launch to what we're doing right now is your data doesn't have to be perfect on this one. You have to have it good enough to send it out, and you have to have, I would say maybe 60 or 70% there, but you don't have to have it 100% of the way there. And that was a big learning for us, is now when we send these out, there are with some certain suppliers where we will literally be asking them, hey, what are our terms? And they'll put in, whatever our terms are, and we'll say, great, can you make them better? And then they will actually make them better. So it's an interesting process that way, with depending on the supplier, you can get some of those things to happen, which again was kind of mind-blowing for us versus what we thought we were going to get.
So it is a very new type of technology,
yeah.
Because so far traditionally, enterprise SaaS has been around making people more efficient. Mm-hmm. This is actually going out and conducting business autonomously with a bot.
Yep.
Were there any internal uncertainties, fears around this among people? How can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was originally the team was just highly skeptical about a lot of this. They were saying, as many of us would be like, okay, we're sending a chatbot, we're sending Martin's chatbot out. Like, what are we going to get from this? And so we started doing those things, but I was never a question of if it was going to work because of the experience that I had coming into it. And what we really started to see is we haven't had a lot of apprehension because the way that we're deploying the bot is just making our sourcing team not have to go worry about the tail, because we all probably deal with tail suppliers or suppliers that we don't interact with regularly. And so what the bot does is it kind of helps the team go and kind of take care of that stuff where they don't have great relationships and focus their time and attention on those that they do. So we haven't had a lot of kind of apprehension because I think that the team has seen it as a way that they can stop worrying about that stuff. They have to enter some data, and then once the data is entered, it kind of goes and does its own thing, and then they can kind of move on to other things on their to-do list.
Yeah.
So we haven't had a lot of it.
That's great to hear. Any advice to others who are thinking about this?
Yeah, I think that from my perspective is, this is probably where I say this to Martin, like I am probably one of the best salespeople for Pactum out there just because of my experience. I think that the advice for us, just the experience that Veritiv had with this one, is it probably fits many of your processes, it probably fits many of your businesses more than you might even expect it to. For us, it was just about kind of starting, learning, fine-tuning what is right for your individual business, and then figuring out how to scale it quick. And so that's the thing that if I could go back and make a change, we probably stayed in beta too long, and we could have gone quicker. And so I think that it wasn't that I would necessarily change the strategy on it or I would redo too many things. We've had a tremendous amount of learnings, but I think that the biggest things I would do is I would get through your beta test or whatever you want to do quick, and then just once you start to see that pickup, just get to scale because you can drive a lot of benefit from that.
Learn as you go. So that was it.
Yeah.
Thanks so
Great,
much.
of course.
And do you have any questions for me?
I do. So we've been working with the tool, and obviously we've learned this tool. I'm just curious how you're thinking about the roadmap. Like, what's next for Pactum bots?
What I'm really excited about is negotiation orchestration. Mm-hmm. So if you take any negotiation course, then what they tell you is that preparation is really important. And if you think about it, a bot can prepare really, really efficiently. So what we see, the problem that our customers have is that they have a vast volume, tens of thousands of suppliers, and every supplier, no matter how small, is connected to a lot of complexity, a lot of complex data. So a bot can go through 100 hours of preparation for every little negotiation. I can bring you an example of Maersk. We're doing trucking negotiations for Maersk. So they're the second largest shipper in the world, but they don't own any trucks. And when we do those negotiations, then the bot goes through every transfer that was ever done on that lane, all the lanes this trucker ever took, all the commodity price indices connected to this transfer, and then once prepared, it will go out and negotiate.
That's cool. That's a good one. I like that one. I'm going to tap into that one too. So the other one that I know that we've had conversations around is just the concept of, and we're not going to talk about AI, but how the AI stack is evolving. And I'm just curious your thought on like how you'll be able to use that, or just general thoughts on that.
Yeah. So we have a rules-based AI. Mm-hmm. So it consists of different layers. The first layer is the value function. It's a mathematical model that determines any state in that negotiation. Then we have contract-based sampling, where for any negotiation, we generate 2 million outcomes and then start honing in on the realistic ones based on information that we have retrieved. Then we have the behavioral learnings. Every negotiation is an A/B test and improves the next one. And LLMs, large language models, are in the bottom layer right now. We use them to design negotiations. We use them to sift through historic data to find competitive suppliers for the given supplier, for instance. But we don't use large language models in live negotiations because we're inherently AI. So we know that with the current technology, that's impossible. It's impossible to guardrail a large language model so well so that it's actually safe to negotiate on behalf of Walmart, because We have, once we reach the end of the negotiation, we actually seal the deal. So so it can't go wrong. What I'm excited about in the future is that Google's DeepMind is now testing with a new type of technology, which kind of works like a human brain, which has a logical part and a creative part. And the logical part drives the thinking forward, and then the creative part provides ideas. So that once that kind of technology evolves far enough, then we'll be the first to deploy a large language model type of negotiation in the live environment.
Got it, that's good. And as you're thinking about that, it's interesting. It just kind of brings me to thinking about like data and security within all that. I guess how are you guys thinking about data and security, and how are you keeping me safe, Martin?
Yeah. So one principle that we took early on was that we teach our models based on the behavioral learnings, all the psychological data. How do we do anchor offers? How do we phrase sentences and so on? But we don't teach our models from the commercial data of our customers. So we keep those sealed inside Veritiv or Walmart or Maersk.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Another one I'm just curious about is, I know the Veritiv experience very well. I've dealt with the Wesco experience, but just from your perspective, I guess, what are some learnings you have across Walmart, Maersk, Wesco, Veritiv, and others?
There are some fascinating learnings from the simple ones, like for instance, Mondays yield the best negotiations, to the more complicated ones. We're able to, from very simple questions like, hi, how are you? We're able to determine supplier sentiment from the first sentences. And based on if the sentiment is positive or we detect some issues, then the flow of the negotiation changes to adapt to that.
That's really interesting. That's good. I guess as you think about everyone here in the room, I guess what would be some advice? You kind of asked me a similar question, like what would be advice that you'd have for this group to just get started?
I think start from the simple.
Agree.
There are very simple negotiations that can be conducted. Payment terms negotiations, negotiations for low dollar spend, and really the data you need to get started is the name of the supplier, the contact information, and to your point, if we don't have the contact information, then we actually have a team that will fill some of those gaps and will find that contact information. And you probably need like the current payment terms. Most companies have that data somewhere, and then go into the more complicated use cases like you described.
Yeah, and it's a good point where Pactum actually went out for Wesco and did scraping. That's why when you heard me talk about it, when they were scraping, because they didn't have our contact information in the way they needed it, so what they did is they went and scraped, and it went right to the CFO, because we were at the time we were a publicly traded company, so they found that one. So it went right to the CFO, and then it kind of filtered over to me. So the scraping up front was helpful.
So 2 Fortune 500 companies were negotiating through Pactum.
True. That's a good point.
On CFO level.
That's a good point. Very good. Well, I guess you've heard Martin and I talking a lot. I guess are there any? We wanted to find time to open it up for you, so you could ask questions about maybe the Veritiv experience, or for Martin as well.
Kay Burns from 3A Composites. If there's a bit of learning about what your company does from a negotiation standpoint, how do you manage if you're maybe a relatively inexperienced procurement group that it's not learning bad negotiations?
So the first negotiations were designed by negotiation professors. I went through Harvard's program on negotiation, and we got a lot of contacts in the negotiation space, and the first negotiations were designed by humans. And then as we go through those negotiations and we're iterating, then these improve based on this data. So we're not learning based on some sort of existing negotiations data, and that gives us some advantages. We are able to avoid biases as well, because we're learning from our own specific A/B tests inside negotiations.
So the real life application to that is when we sat down with Pactum, it wasn't like we were saying, we want you to say this when they say that. What we went and we said is, hey, this is what our overall objective is. We think payment terms would be an area we want to focus on. And then the Pactum team kind of says, okay, based on what we know, this is how we would structure the negotiation. So even if our team was very immature in these categories as well, and so based on that, it was never an issue for us because, again, it was guided kind of by the learnings that they already had. So it's kind of a cheat code for us. It was great.
We have a question over here.
I am Dupree Jones from CSL Bearing. My question is, when it comes down to contracting, our attorneys love to be involved. Mm-hmm. How did you, I guess from a Veritiv perspective, and even from Rotten, how do you incorporate legal into the mix?
Up front and often. Up front being, what we did is we basically went through and we structured that this is the new agreement that you're signing with Veritiv. And so the legal team got everything that they needed in that one. And it was really helpful for us because what the process also did for us is it allowed us to go through, and every supplier that participated or didn't was given the new code of like our supplier code of conduct, the most recent one, and we had a data record from everyone that they would click it and accept it. Now for us, from an EH&S perspective, right there, that's gold, because now I have 100 of those in the system that we didn't have before. But for us, the best way that we did it was we got through legal up front, we had all the documentation approved, so that when we had kind of the Veritiv paper that eventually ends up in DocuSign, that paper and that kind of workflow is already blessed. I don't know if you've seen other people do different or how that works.
I think the one key to being able to grow fast with such an approach is to keep it simple.
Yeah,
and we keep it very simple. So we're not trying to be a legal tech company. We're not trying to teach an AI system to understand contracts. What we do is we go to your lawyers, we get a contract, and then we ask, okay, if we change this, what would the language be? And we get two options, and then the robot chooses which option of language it will just insert into a ready-made template. Yeah.
So that's a good point. It's almost creating the updated legal document on the fly.
We have a question back here.
Adrian from REI. You mentioned that you do sentiment analysis at the beginning of the negotiation. That changes the flow. Can you talk a bit more about what that looks like and what science are you basing that on?
So a lot of the science we are creating, we see from our own stats. And one incredible learning that we didn't plan to do, that we just stumbled on, was the "Hi, how are you?" question. So it's "Hi, how are you?" And there in that particular section, there are two ways to answer: great and hello. And we saw that when to such a question, "How are you?" people respond as "hello," that means they don't want to play ball. And that meant we saw almost a 25% drop in conversion and value creation for both sides. So then we learned that, we have to change the flow.
Good to know. Over here, there we go.
Hi. Tony Wright from Mattress Firm. You'd mentioned that you had 30% response. What happened with the other 70? Were you able to find out? And is there a plan to go after them? And is that going to be manual? And if you could just comment on that.
Great question. So yeah, the 30% that went through, we're looking at the 70 right now. The team reached out manually to many of them. I would call it the suppliers of note, the larger ones they reached out to, not all of them. We would absolutely put them on the list to go back to them again. Because again, as we continue to learn, we continue to evolve on our approach. We think that will definitely help them. But right now, what we did is looking at the 30 that flowed through, we love them. The 70 that didn't, that's just continued opportunity. We got to figure out how to go crack that code.
And in many negotiations, the conversion rate is 95%, like in logistics, for instance, which is very, very straightforward. So it depends on the use case. Yep.
Okay, Ethan, I did not want you to put the mic away. I was saying hold the mic up. So over here, we have another microphone. Does anyone else have a question? I think this is fascinating. And this morning, obviously everyone woke up and realized we have a whole bunch of risk in our supply chain that is new because of for those of you who haven't been following, there was a barge that took out a bridge, a very, very important bridge in the ports of Baltimore this morning. And supply chain transparency and the speed, the technology now can notify people and say that there is a risk event that just happened. So the more we can automate and the more we can use AI and the smarter and faster we can respond to these things is just phenomenal. So it's very, very impressive. But Zoe, I'm surprised you didn't have a question for them about negotiations. Okay, does anyone else have a question? We still have the 2 mic runners. Right here, come on up this way. Nick is running to the back, you can run to the center. Here, there you go. Whoever gets to the person first.
Thanks, Nick. From a data
Oh,
security...
I'm sorry, your name and company?
Oh, sorry. Arthur Cowson from Fannie Mae. From a data security standpoint, how do you exchange any sensitive information? And when they're going to provide that information, is there a portal that they log into, or is it all email-based? How does that part work?
We send only an invite through the email, and the email is coming from a Veritiv server.
Yep.
And then there is they don't even have to register because it's a dedicated email, so they just click on an email, and a system starts talking to them in a chat interface. So it's, yeah, and that's a separate secure environment.
That's why they're called mic runners. Okay, over here. It's on. You just talk.
Okay. My name is Neeraj. I'm with Zillow. And this is fascinating. Back in the days in like 2000s, 2006, like the big thing was e-sourcing and reverse auctions and all that technology. What you're describing, I'm actually having a hard time conceptualizing, so I might have to do a demo with you. But are there certain categories that work really well with your technology? Are there some better than others? Are there, like, is hardware and like hard goods better to go through your process versus like professional services and consulting and some of those other things?
Yeah, there has to be scale, there has to be fragmentation, there has to be complexity. So basically we're converting scale, fragmentation, and complexity into value. So one customer came to us and asked, hey, you know, we're buying a ship, can you negotiate it? No, one-off thing, you know, people negotiate it better. But if there's 10,000 vendors, or if like for one global telco were negotiating buying cell phones that they sell in their stores, and those are big strategic deals. But the fragmentation is incredible because they have to renegotiate every model every 3 months for every region. So for people, again, it becomes overwhelming. So those are the good examples.
And one of the things about Veritiv is we're owned by a private equity now, where we have 46 sister and brother companies with us. And so we're actually doing a project right now to look across those 46, and we haven't found a use case that doesn't apply. We haven't found that it would be more direct or indirect spend related. So for us, we're going to take it into indirect spend, where primarily we've been in our direct spend. And then we haven't, again, from healthcare services through, you know, packaging distribution, we haven't found a place that we couldn't apply it.
That's pretty impressive.
And I wanted to introduce Silvana also. Hi, Silvana. So she's also with Pactum, so if anyone has questions later, to me or to Silvana.
And over here, Zoe, you do have a question.
Yes, hi. I'm Zoe. So 2 questions. First one is, do you think that the limit really ends with the tail spend, or are you looking to get more into strategic negotiations, maybe outside of the ones that you mentioned that are super time intensive and therefore worth it to outsource? And if you do want to do that, how do you respond to maybe concerns that AI is taking over the roles of people in procurement? Because I can imagine that that is a fear, especially when this is a lot better than probably people can do on their own.
Yeah, it's a really great question. In the first part of it, I would say we started in the tail spend. We are in process right now of pushing Pactum out to much larger suppliers, so up in our kind of small to mid-range. You know, these are suppliers that we're doing 10 million or more with. So at this point, we're moving up pretty quick. We just wanted to beta test it, and it was a natural place to start. And so after we kind of proved it out, we said, let's bring it in. And the way I would think about it from the supplier perspective, again, we think that we've done things to try to soften the exchange so that the supplier feels like it's more like they're talking to us as much as you can make that come to light. And from an internal Veritiv employee perspective, I would suggest that they are all very excited about it. They feel like this is innovative, and where they still spend time is they spend their time making sure that, okay, what's the upfront, negotiating principles? What do we want to go after? Working around the higher order thought of it versus the execution. And I can tell you the team's been very excited about that because it avoids them going out and calling hundreds of suppliers they've never talked to. Now what they get to focus their time on is, okay, what are we trying to solve? Where do we want to apply this, and what are the terms we want to go after, or the rebates, or the pricing programs, those type of things. So it's been helpful from that. When honestly, it's we haven't seen a lot of it. We could come into it one day, but we haven't seen it yet.
Thank you. Over here.
Yeah, hi, Joe Shatinsky, Daiichi Sankyo. What percentage would you say of your engagements end with negotiating with your current supplier as opposed to ending where you're switching suppliers or consolidating suppliers?
That's a very good question. Most of them end with current suppliers, unless we're negotiating some kind of a supplier consolidation deal after an M&A or something like that. But there are two key elements that are special to what we do. One is that we don't require a sourcing event. The bot can just reach out to a existing supplier, and start negotiating just like a human would if they would pick up the phone and call the supplier. There doesn't need to be any competitive event or any new supplier coming in. And so that's one key difference. And the other key difference was that the bot will actually seal the deal at the end. Humans don't have to. We can build a human-in-the-loop system, but once our customers have done it 100th times, then they say, okay, we get it. The bot doesn't go out of bounds, and it accepts deals autonomously from then on.
Very good. We've got a question back here.
Yeah, I'm Brandon from Boeing. What if the supplier just does not want to negotiate with the bot or the AI? Can they opt out of it? And then what's that process look like?
Yeah, so we get that question a lot. We usually begin from the mid-tail or the tail. Quite often these are unmanaged suppliers. And I don't know, Dan, what your experience have been, but some of them are actually happy that someone reaches out, right?
Yeah, no, that was the surprising part, is that like because the suppliers we chose were such on the outskirts that they really don't hear from us except for the relationship of the POs going back and forth, that they were actually encouraged to hear. We would get comments like, oh, it's great to hear, actually reach out and hear from somebody at Veritiv, how can we grow more? So we started to see those things come in. For us, the way that we looked at it is that you can absolutely opt out, and that would be, again, if you think of us sending it to 100 suppliers, 30 completed it, 70 didn't. 70 have not completed it, and then that is our chance, like we were mentioning earlier, to go back to and try to reach out to them again, either directly and live or try to think of another way to do it through the bots. But you can absolutely, they could all opt out if they chose to, which is why us adding in some of the videos and some of the things up front to help them understand what it is started to make an impact for us.
Very good. So is there an audit trail? Is every single bot conversation recorded and captured in the contract or in your repository somewhere?
Yeah. And not only audit trail, but you can actually track negotiations happening live, which is pretty exciting to see how people negotiate.
Oh, so you can actually see the bot talking to them?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I'd love to see that. So if they stop by your booth, are you doing a demo out there?
We don't have a booth.
Oh, shame on you.
Yes.
Yeah. Shame on you. All right, that'll teach you to not have a booth next time. Sorry, we'd love to see a demo because it sounds really interesting, but you don't have a booth. Okay. All right. Any last questions then from the audience, since they don't have a booth? You have to ask here. Oh, we have a hand up here. Run. Somebody run. It's a race between Ethan and Nick. Who can get there first? We don't know. Throw the mic.
Regina Altruder, Sensata Technologies. On the tails of your audit question, do you have reporting capabilities so you can see a dashboard of all the status?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah. Maybe.
Yes, they do. It's great. What it'll show you, as Martin said, is you can watch people go through the process. It shows you how many people you sent it to, how many people are in process, how many completed it, and then it'll show you we talked about the soft savings earlier. It also shows you hard savings. So you can literally just watch it go and log in, hit refresh on it and see if what you've kind of gotten that day. It's kind of a video game almost.
We had one time we started a project and the CPO went on vacation when the implementation started. When he came back and saw the dashboards, we did so much work in a week. That was he saw the savings. He was pretty amazed, autonomously.
That is fantastic. So Dan, are you going to be around for a while if people want to chat with you and get
Sure,
more
I can stay
questions
around
and
a while.
answers? Okay. And Martin, you're going to be around because you don't have a booth. We'll have to find you. Yes. And you. So, but I just want to thank you. Your conversation was so good, and obviously with a number of questions, you've piqued people's interest, and there's a lot to learn from you guys. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.